They are suing Spotify for $150 million because Spotify has decided recently to make a bundle deal. I didn't even know that audiobooks were available on Spotify until I read this article that the MLC was suing Spotify for bundling.
What's going down is the At Odds podcast. Still at odds, not back to the old brand yet. Could happen. Erinn's drinking the White Claw early because this is going to be a hard conversation. And actually, I have no idea what she's drinking, but it looks sparkly and, plausibly alcoholic. How are the two of you feeling this morning?
It's not alcohol.
Feeling good and tired at the same time. Still a lot of stuff going on. The Lesbian Homie 3 is doing well. Appreciate everybody's feedback. I'm starting to see kind of like convergence, that's the right word, of like music folks starting to like know about Big Ja or like know about Big Ja and then realize that I'm like helping. I was on live. So we go live every Tuesday after the episodes premiere on YouTube. So you can watch the whole thing in its entirety if you purchase it at moment.co/Big Ja. Or you can just wait for episodes to drop on YouTube. So at 6:00 every Tuesday, they drop on YouTube. And then at 6:30, I'll go live from the Lesbian Homie page. And then I'll bring on Big Ja and I'll bring on the guests. And then I kind of just host a conversation with the cast, answer questions. They answer questions. We receive questions from the fans. I'm starting to see a few people kind of like, a couple of people called me Mr. Funk Volume because Mr. Funk Volume used to be my Twitter handle because it was a joke. Because the guys used to call me that, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I'm starting to see kind of like, not a merging of the worlds. That would be super extra. But definitely people like from my world, from the music world, finding out about the stuff that we're doing with Big Ja. So that lets me know that like Big Ja is moving in the right direction. But yeah, Erinn, how are you feeling?
I'm good. I'm tired. I'm running a writing camp, or I'm part of the team running a really big writing camp here in Atlanta. For the board that I serve on, ATL Collective. So we make it really accessible for talented songwriters who wouldn't normally have the opportunity to be in the studio space with major top liners experience that. And the songs are just amazing. Because I think people think that if you aren't a top liner, you're probably completely a novice, and it's not like that. Like I'm talking about, we have just some incredible music coming out. I'm excited about it, but it's really long days. I'm running the nighttime programming, so I'm bringing in my music business homies to come teach everybody. And then last night we did a therapy session with 2 therapists. It was a late night session, so I'm washed, but I'm encouraged and I'm excited. And I really see a lot of good things happening in the city, a lot of beautiful writers, so I'm feeling good.
We should let you guys know that you can get 3 months free music distribution on tolost.com just using the promo code @odds. But more than that, not more than that, but separate from that, we're doing weekly Two Lost office hour sessions that have been really dope. Had a great conversation with my guy, Sam Saidman, who we talked through brand partnerships. And it was a dope conversation. It'll be on you. It's actually on YouTube now. If you want to get into brand partnerships, that is one that I would encourage everybody to go back and watch because that was a very good one, probably one of the best. But every Monday they've been really dope. So make sure you tap into Two Lost office hours every Monday, with the exception of this Monday because it's Memorial Day. But we'll pick them back up in the following Mondays. Just tap in all the Two Lost social media platforms. We simulcast it to all the platforms. Check in.
So do you have to be a member of Two Lost? Can people sign up for the 3-month trial and attend those sessions?
Yeah, it's open to everybody. They're not gated at all. You can just be on Instagram or be on Twitter and participate in these conversations. But I really wish that the MEC or the At Odds podcast was available in 2008. There's so much good information out there now amongst a lot of bad information. So you got to have like your go-to platforms. But there's so much great information out there now. The people are opening up, sharing their experiences. So tap in.
Oh, yeah, there's some terrible information out there. We're going to touch on some of it today. But to kick things off, Dame, you had an interesting topic that I know Erinn and I were excited to chime in on.
Yeah. So, especially in my role now, I kind of see a lot of artists come through Two Lost. We have a lot of artists at different levels of their career. And when I talk about this, I always talk about it from like 0 to 10, 0 being you just put out your first album or just first song, to 10 being Drake. And there are definitely reasons. And let me take a step back again. So I would say from 4 to 6 is where you start becoming a full-time musician. So, it's very difficult to make it to 4, 5, or 6. And I would say to get there requires obviously solid brand, dope content, consistency. Those are some of the things that we've always talked about. But there's a lot of artists, like once they get to the 4 and 5, it's hard for them to get to the 6, 7, and 8. And I'm seeing a lot of artists drop off for a lot of recurring reasons. And I want to pitch it to you guys because I'm sure you guys already have and understand some of those reasons. And then I'll give my opinion, after you guys, you kind of weigh in. But why do you think artists that are fortunate enough to make it to 4, 5, and 6, they're super fortunate because that's rare. It's rare to even get to a place where you're making music full time and that's your only thing. But then they're going to fall off and not make it to 6, 7, 8 because of why? What have you guys seen?
I was, as you're saying that, something's coming to mind, an experience I had with one of the groups that I learned a lot from, not necessarily for the right reasons. Effectively, I was producing all of their music. They were making a living off of their music and I wasn't getting a cent. And, so I already feel like that type of greed could go either way. Honestly, I think greed is a common trait of many financially successful people. Greed is also the downfall of many would-be successful people. I think you have to be greedy and strategic. I'm not encouraging anyone to be greedy at all. If you're greedy, fuck you. But I'm not going to be naive either and say, well, the greedy never win, because they win all the time. So I think this artist, it was a group. It was two of them. And I guess if you count me a trio, I didn't really feel like I was a part of it, but I guess I was technically. And they were a lesbian hip hop group. The lead rapper was just like was becoming kind of an icon for a lot of young women and lesbian women. And suddenly they just decided it was the stupidest shit ever. I mean, and they were making a living off this. They weren't rich off music, but they were making a living off of it. The lead rapper decided to de-emphasize being gay and start making just kind of like bland mainstream music with really no substance, because her plan was to get on Ellen. And I'm like, Ellen's a lesbian though. What are you doing? And we would have these meetings and she would just say, yeah, we gotta stop being so in people's faces about this whole lesbian thing. And I'm sitting there, I felt like I was, an imposter in the music business because I hadn't really built my own foundation. So I would try to suggest stuff and then it'd get shot down, and you don't have much experience. You don't really get what we're trying to do. I'm like, oh, okay, you're right. I don't. What do I know? And that was their downfall. That was, I think there were a lot of reasons that things didn't go well, but I feel like a lot of artists, when they get to the 3 or 4, even the 2, whenever they're seeing any sort of momentum, they start questioning everything about their art. And it's the weirdest thing. They get to 4 and they're like, I gotta pivot. Bitch, you don't have to pivot. Shit, you made it to 4 for doing exactly what you've been doing. But I see this consistently with artists when they get a little success. It's like imposter syndrome and fear and anxiety all converging, and they start doubting themselves and like, nah, I gotta switch things up. And they switch things up And all you're doing, just like this artist I'm talking about, you turn your back on your core fan base. Your core fan base got you to 4. If you hit 8 and drop back down to 4, your core fan base is still going to be there, unless you turn your backs on them, and then you lose 4, and there goes your momentum. You think you're going to hit 5. You never hit 5. And if you do hit 5, it's short lived because it's a flash in the pan, because those people don't care about you. Your core fan base does. So I see that a lot, and I don't know why it happens, but I would love to hear some insight. Fear is an irrational force. And so I guess it doesn't have to make sense. But if anyone feels that way in the comments or has experienced that, please share. I'm still to this day completely confused by what I've experienced in these groups.
Pain, that makes a lot of sense. I just have a question for you, because I feel like, if an artist goes a different direction for a project, like if your audience is still there, you can still kind of circle back and come back to it. Did they not like make mute? Did they just stay in that particular lane, or did they not be like, okay, this didn't work, let me do what I was doing before and see if I can tap back into the core and what they loved them for?
Not really. And I don't think they got the chance to even consider that. I think a lot of it was, I said the F word, fear. Fear and ego are like this. So what a lot of people will do is when they make a fear-based decision, they'll double down on that fear-based decision, because that's where ego comes in. And ego is just there to insulate you from your fear-based decisions. And so it's like a snowball effect. You make one bad decision, then you cover it up with ego, and then it keeps rolling and getting bigger, and you just keep covering. So eventually there was some sabotage, some self-sabotage in that group. And by then I was out, because I wasn't going to be disrespected like that. I'm a kid at this time. I'm 19 when I joined this group, so I didn't know anything about the music business or life. I'm in a way, I'm very grateful for the experience, because I learned a lot from it. But damn, you got to learn from other people's mistakes.
That makes sense, because at 19 we didn't really have the robust social media platforms, and because I think you are kind of given a little bit more of a chance depending on kind of what you do. And this is probably a bad example because he's a superstar, but my wife loves Justin Timberlake, and from what I understand, I don't follow Justin like that. I mean, I think he's talented, he's a legend, but I don't listen to his music like that. But from what I understand, he kind of veered in a different direction more recently in maybe country or some other things that he was doing. But then now you kind of see him with some of the up and coming R&B acts, kind of tapping back into like the R&B roots. And I think his fan base, at least, or the people that love like the more R&B stuff, it seems like a lot of people are just like, man, come back. Like they're waiting for them to like tap back into what they loved initially in the Timberland days and stuff like that. So I think maybe it's more likely now you have a chance because you're in constant communication with your fans and you're constantly putting out, or you need to be, putting out content and engaging your community. Maybe there's.
Well, I think it matters what level you are at when you pivot. He was at a 10. The group I'm talking about was at a 3 going on 4. And to me, if you're already at a 10, it's going to take something crazy for you to get knocked down. For example, Diddy.
I do feel like Justin Timberlake lost a lot of his core fans because I didn't even realize he went back to R&B. And I'm about to hop on his Spotify right now. Oh yeah, he's doing all right. My take on this is I've had so much experience with it. I agree it's self-sabotage, ego, all of that. But I also believe a lot of times when artists hit 3, 4, 5, a lot of them have never been that consistent with something, or they hit 3, 4, 5 quicker, I won't even say quickly, but pretty quickly. And so then they feel like it's easier than it actually is to sustain or go to the next level. So I feel like it's always a consistency conversation. It's either I've never been this consistent this long with something. Now I get to chill, which I've seen so many times. People finally hit something and they're like, nah, I'm going to take a break or I'm going to pull back because they think that they can coast off the momentum. And it's like, no, or you were accelerated by proper timing. I'm not even saying somebody did it for you. You might have hit the internet at the right time with the right sound when the algorithm was changing, and something that would take somebody else 5 or 6 years might have taken you 6 to 7 months or 18 months. And so now your thought process is, oh, let me just pivot because I have this other really creative idea I want to do. And it's like, yo, no, 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 stay here. Like, it doesn't work like that, because you have to give people an opportunity to catch up and to catch on to what you're doing. And then once they catch up and can't catch on, then you have to let them consume you. So it's a multi-step process that I think most artists don't understand the science or the business or the sociology around it, psychology, all of those. And they think, again, it's back to their talent. And a lot of times it's not. It's you're connecting with the market. The market wants this thing. Therefore, you are in your time. It's rarely about talent. Talent adds to it. It's kind of like getting a meal. If the meal is cool, but I was really hungry, great. Perfect time, perfect place. If it's amazing, I'm probably going to come back, but that still requires an audience. Maybe somebody isn't a foodie. They don't actually realize how amazing your food is, but it was the right time and right place and it connected. So I think artists credit too much of their growth to talent instead of looking at the math, science, data behind it and why it worked. So they're quick to pivot thinking that their talent is the sticky, the tackiness that keeps people, and it's not. And so I think more people, especially artists, have to be mindful of why their fans like them. Why did this moment work? What has caused me to continuously ascend? If you need to evolve, I try to get people to evolve in plateaus, but that's planned. It's like, where are we going next? What is the fuel on the fire? We should always be going here. Plateaus are natural, but plateaus don't necessarily require pivots. Sometimes if you're practicing, you're just going to take the next step. Hey, our fan base is getting bored, or algorithms are changing, or consumption habits are changing, or the world is changing. We need to go here. But if you are so focused on highlighting your talent versus being an entrepreneur, you're going to miss out on the continued growth going. And I feel like I see that from 3 to 4. I think 3 is like, you may be making $20,000 to $30,000 a year. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't know. In my head, you're not quite full time if you don't leave the house, or maybe you have another source of income that's small. You can kind of pump fake full time or drive Uber Eats, which is nothing wrong with that. But going to a 4 is really typically harder than that 1 to 3 step. And then, once you get 4 mastered and get comfortable, I feel like 4 or 5 is all right. That 6, 7 term, when your team starts to grow, you have to start spending more money. You have to actually go get an audience that you don't understand. You have to have conversations and meetings you don't like. No, it's like, well, I'm the shit and people don't understand me and this company needs to be giving me more money. It's like, bro, calm down. You're making 6 figures. We think it's dope, but there's a lot more in this world,
Yeah, and we don't see that, unfortunately. Like with Nipsey Hussle, right? Especially now, he's just become an icon for not just hip hop, but for the musical entrepreneur, right? But these are the people that found out about him after the success, and maybe even posthumously. I'm telling you, that man was doing runs everywhere, nonstop. I went to New York. He's out clearly from the West Coast. That's the whole thing. When I was in New York, I heard about him. And I was hearing about him everywhere when I was in New York doing label runs. That was before people cared about social media like they do now. I was getting calls from Nipsey Hussle every time I would play his record on my mix show. Like, he was at probably a 4 or 5 at that point, but he was moving like he was barely at a 0.5. And that continued throughout his career. He didn't take a break. He didn't fall back. I wouldn't say he switched up. His sound did change, but it was a very clear gradual evolution. It wasn't like he just Post Malone and is like, fucking, I'm doing country now. That wouldn't have made sense. So, I think a lot of people love to deify these folks in the music business, but they really don't study their lives.
So my take, I mean, I think you guys made, great points, because there's a lot of reasons that you can fall off in this industry. And that's why it's so difficult to continue to progress into the 7, 8s, and 9s. But from what I've seen, in addition to what you guys have said, because to get to 3, 4, you probably just kind of doing stuff locally with your team, maybe just in your bedroom, putting out music. And then 4 or 5 is when, like, relationships really matter, education really matters. And I think those are a couple of things that really derail folks, because you don't really still understand the business yet. And then you got to interact with people, these relationships, these platforms. You're like trying to get in the industry, so to say. And I think this is where a lot of teams fumble, because there's still, we talked about it in many episodes before, like there still is this like cloud of skepticism that just hovers over the music industry. Everybody thinks they're being taken advantage of. So now when you have a little success, getting 3 to 4, you start interacting with people, but you're super paranoid and you're thinking everybody's out to get you. Here's an example of what I'm talking about here at Two Lost, right? So priority artists are given free accounts and they're given additional services. However, the only thing is it's still 100% pass through. The only caveat is that the music has to live on the platform for a year. The artist is not committed to the platform for a year. They can sign a deal and make new music, but the music that you put out through Two Lost has to stay on the platform for a year, because we want market share. And if we're going to pour additional resources into making some songs go, we want to make sure that those streams are still accounted for in our market share, right? There have been times where artists say they didn't know that, or, something happens and they want to move their catalog because they just signed a deal. They might have even inked the deal already and committed to bringing catalog over from Two Lost to somewhere else, even though they were already in an agreement that said, hey, you have to stay here for a year. And then they start crying and complaining and it starts a big old mess. But it's like, yo, you signed this situation and you knew what the deal was. Like, you just can't move. You can make new music. You can sign. You can do whatever you want. But those are the little things, then your ego gets involved and you start blowing it up, and then you start going to social media saying Two Lost is shady. And it's like, what is going on? And this is like one, small example out of many that can happen. But for me, it's a lot of lack of education. It's a lot of fumbling of relationships. It's a lot of fumbling of team members, and your team can't get it right. You can't manage your team. Everybody, it's really hard to manage expectations and build a really solid team that stays loyal and everybody is, in the same boat, paddling in the same direction. But I would say it really comes down to, a lot of things, because like I said, what you guys said, I think is on point as well in terms of like shifting creatively. The ego is huge. I think it all kind of like builds all together and creates like a huge shitstorm that really prevents you from like, oh man, you guys made it in terms of being full-time artists, but you're not going to be full-time artists for long, because, you're not going to be able to progress for a lot of the reasons that we talked about. So continue to educate yourself, build a solid team, and just don't be paranoid. The education should allow you not to be paranoid. Right? Like we've said it so many times, like I'm comfortable walking into any room, not because I know everything, but I do have experience, but I also have a network of people that can answer any question that gets thrown at me. I may not know it right away, but I can say, hold on, let me get back to you before I sign this, because I need to know what this means and all the consequences for signing this situation. But yeah.
I want to add one more.
So I think Erinn wanted to talk about, my bad.
Sorry. The last thing I want to add, sorry. The last thing I want to add to that is I think that a lot of artists just want to live on the internet. I think especially in this like 1 to 4 phase, because a lot of them have accomplished it in the last 4 years. And it's because pandemic, social media, social trends were changing. And you might have done well on the internet, even kind of coming off of the SoundCloud era, but they were used to people reaching out, anybody from A&Rs to songwriters to fans, and you accumulating a fan base online and only wanting to get booked for big shows that pay good money, and then you want to go back into your studio. And it's like, I tell people all the time, I'm like, I'm actually effective in the real world. Like, all of my business still is 100% word of mouth. I rarely get reached out to like off the internet. And then when people reach out to me off the internet, they have a misconception of my value. So then when I quote my prices and rates, they're like, oh, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah. But then when I get somebody, when somebody refers me, typically the people referring me have such high things to say. When people look at me online, plus the high, or they've met me before, so I think that artists have to go outside and not just outside to be like, I'm gonna go see this person, they're gonna sign me or hire me or whatever. You need to be building relationships, talking to people, being around people. If you're a manager, that's something that I feel like my artists, when I was managing, missed out on majorly. Like they should have been pulling up to a lot of the stuff that I was going to. They should have been at the conferences, the festivals, and I would throw a lot of stuff. And that was, I would say, almost a mistake on my part. I would be going to all these festivals already or whatever. I was throwing after parties, mixers, whatever, just to highlight my artist. But if I did it for one artist, none of my other 10 or 15 would show up. You know what I'm saying? It was insane. I'm like, if you already have an in and I'm here, even if I'm not throwing an event, you should be here. So I think if you have a really dope manager who's out and about, or even if they're young and new, when I was young and new, I was still pulling up places trying to learn stuff. Go outside with your manager. It gives them the opportunity to not just talk about you. It's now show and tell. Yeah. Oh, he's over there. Hey, come over here. Meet, you know what I'm saying? And then don't be weird. If you need to learn how to talk to people, if you need to learn how to engage outside of just performing, perfect opportunity is to go with somebody that you know and trust and have them introduce you to people, and you learn how to have a conversation. You ear hustle, you stand close to them, see what the conversation is about, see how people operate in these spaces. But there's a lot of education to be had off of the internet. Like, pull up on us. If you see me or Dame announcing we're going to be at something, if you see Payne is doing something, pull up on us. There's so much more value than y'all sending us a DM or commenting. We're grateful. Please comment. That's great. Stay on the video, argue with yourselves, run up the views, but also pull up on us.
Unless you're weird, don't pull up on me if you weird.
Yeah, please. Okay, so we can transition to Erinn's, the top 10 fashion fumbles from the Met Gala.
That's hilarious. I wasn't really into the Met this year, but I want to talk about the MLC. So for those of you who don't know, the MLC was formed was it 2018, 2019? And their sole purpose was to go after additional royalties that weren't given to songwriters. So there's, a publisher. You may publish your own music or you may be signed to a publisher. There is a pub admin who will function as a person who goes to get your publishing. If you self-administer your publishing, they'll go after it. There is like Song Trust. They'll catch some of your royalties on both sides. And then there is Sound Exchange. Sound Exchange is going after additional, Payne, correct me if I'm wrong, master royalties. So then you have, your typical master royalties, which are coming from spot streaming, sales of your records, whatever. The MLC sits kind of in this ambiguous place to catch all the additional scraps of royalties that belong to songwriters that were originally going to the black box. And The black box is essentially just a place. And then there's Harry Fox Agency, which I don't know still operates the same. And correct me if I'm wrong about this. I'm always still learning about both sides of the master, where the money's coming from. So I'm speaking from my knowledge. I have a decent knowledge, but I'm open to being corrected and helped. Pain has definitely helped me on the side before, like, yo, explain this to me. So I'm explaining in layman's terms, but the MLC is catching all the additional straggly royalties. One place they're catching royalties from is YouTube. So if you're an independent artist and you upload your music to a streaming service via a distributor, content ID, things like that will catch your music used by creators most of the time. But a lot of times, a part of your song is either used in a mix or something with a DJ that you're not signed to a major record label, so they're not going to catch it. So MLC is catching those royalties. If your song is on TV and maybe your publisher or PRO didn't grab as much royalty, they're catching that. They're catching all sorts of things. So the MLC is really helpful to the music industry. If I'm not mistaken, they came in and did, they've done, Payne, correct me, is it 15, their goal is to do $15 billion within their first 10 years of a company. I think they've done something like $1.7 billion so far since they formed. So helpful agency. I just want to explain this because they're very, very new and a lot of people have not heard of the MLC. They don't understand how valuable they are. If the MLC reaches out to you, which is what they're starting to do, they had announced that at Music Biz. They've now hired more team. They're now going after smaller songwriters. Hey, you have royalties unclaimed here. We've already aggregated them for you. You just have to fill out this paperwork. Great people. I would go look at their website. I would sign up. You probably have royalties missing, especially if you have top lined or if you have dropped a ton of songs in your independent career and have, 100,000 plus streams, not per song, but total. So the MLC is also serving as a lobbyist group. They are suing Spotify for $150 million because Spotify has decided recently to make a bundle deal. So all of your family plans, duo plans, which I've never heard of, I don't know what a duo plan is, and your premium accounts are now being served as bundle plans. And that's bundled with their new audiobook offering, which is also paired with, if I'm not mistaken, in some regions, also with podcast. So they're saying, because we're bundling it with audiobooks and podcast, we are going to water down the songwriter shares on the monthly subscriptions because clearly people are subscribing to also listen to audiobooks and to listen to podcasts, which is a logical fallacy because we didn't opt into that. They just made it a part of what we were doing. I didn't even know that audiobooks were available on Spotify until I read this article that the MLC was suing Spotify for bundling. So I'm like, oh, I guess I have audiobooks available. Let me see if I need to cancel my Audible subscription. But for them to take that as precedence to dilute your earnings again is egregious. And that's what the MLC is here for. They're like, hey, we're going to sue you. They recently got off of a lawsuit with Pandora. Apparently, Pandora is in the process of fixing it because I haven't heard much from that. But the MLC has a ton of lawyers at their disposal and they have nothing to lose. Spotify can't countersue. Spotify can't, because all they're doing is just looking at the data points. And so to our audience, I just want to, the royalty rate is going from 15.2% to 12%. So you're losing 3.1, 3.2% of your royalties. For somebody who has less than 1 million monthly listeners, even 500,000, it may not affect you much. It may be noticeable. Let's say 250,000. If you're less than 250,000 monthly listeners, it may not affect you in a major way. But my point in bringing this up is that you should know your streams of income, your royalty rates. Everybody's complaining. Spotify doesn't pay shit. I don't rock with Spotify. I'm going to throw my stuff on even. Please do. but also understand where your money is coming from. Understand black box royalties, publishing, song trust, sound exchange, the MLC. Because when things like this happen and you're disgruntled, places like the MLC will let you email them and say, hey, I have a question. I saw this and this is changing. Can you explain this to me? They serve as an education database. Their FAQ is phenomenal. If you have questions or concerns, before you email them, go on their frequently asked questions. Go look up Day Bogan. Day essentially runs the MLC from a non-traditional standpoint. Day has teachings, interviews, podcasts for days. I just think we need to be intentional about looking at where our money is coming from, what's happening to it. We've had a lot of conversations about Spotify in the last year. This is not a F Spotify because it's a tech company. They're going to keep doing what they can do until somebody stops them. So shout out to the MLC, but we as consumers and as aggregators of the product that they're using and servicing need to know where the money is coming from, where it's going to. If you decide to opt out from an educated space. But if you decide to stay, understand how it affects you in your day-to-day business.
Yeah, and the MLC's been suing a lot of agencies, which makes me think they're actually doing what they said they were going to do. I mean, it's a mandate from U.S. Congress, and this happened years ago. But from my understanding, MLC more or less replaced Harry Fox when it came to collecting mechanical rights in the digital space. Now, initially there was confusion as to how they were going to work together, and I still feel like there's confusion as to what MLC's role is versus Harry Fox. Just kind of looking up information, it doesn't seem all that clear, at least from the end user standpoint. I know I'm a member of both, but I don't know what that means. I'm just going to be honest. And a lot of people don't. So I think it's either developing or I just don't fully understand how the two agencies work together. And Harry Fox was always pretty elusive to me as far as how they did what they did. MLC is becoming a little clearer, but MLC is taking action. And historically, you talked about the black box, Erinn. Harry Fox had hundreds of millions of dollars in black box mechanical royalties, and the MLC's mission, part of the MLC's mission, they're doing a lot of things for songwriters, but part of MLC's mission involved cleaning that mess up and getting the proper royalties to the artists who are entitled to them.
If I'm not mistaken, Harry Fox, even if you had to have a profile, you had to claim your royalties. If I'm not mistaken, or you had to because it was always so confusing to me. With MLC, I think if you have a profile, they just disperse it. I think that's the difference. But I also don't have an active MLC account now because I'm not directly working with any artists anymore. So I'm not looking at their accounts. But if I'm not mistaken, I think that's how it works, right? Like Harry Fox, you kind of had to essentially ask for them to give the money that was there. And so MLC was trying to pull some of that money over. And I feel like Harry Fox had an expiration date where it was the statute of limitation was 7 years. But if you went back and claimed it, they could reach into the black box past the 7 years if you made a specific claim. But then it got redispersed to the major labels. But Harry Fox got to keep a portion of it. But the whole time Harry Fox was holding this money, they were investing it kind of like a bank in, markets and whatever. Whereas the MLC, if I'm not mistaken, is neutral party and focused on immediate redistribution. And then even from what I'm understanding, now starting initiatives to go find people. In fact, the writing camp that I'm at, they just came on as a sponsor and they taught a workshop Monday morning. Hey guys, we have your money. Please come ask me questions. We want you guys to get your money. And I know Harry Fox was like, what is the black box? Who the fuck is Harry Fox? You know what I'm saying? So I think it's just more about transparency and the way that they're pushing the money through. They're trying to give it to you. Whereas Harry Fox was like, well, if you know, you know. And if you ask the right questions, we'll send you a check. I got one check from Harry Fox in my entire career, and I don't remember how I did that. That's back when I was in rock music.
So,
Yeah, it's frustrating.
so I think it's really dope that we have something like the MLC to fight and work on the behalf of artists because, a lot of times artists individually, there's no collective power. So, these companies just kind of move how they want. Now, that's kind of what they do anyway, but at least we have the MLC to kind of combat certain things. And I know that people, pounced on me when we were having like the Spotify rate debate, but this is where I'm on the other side of things because, can a company like Spotify, a public company that has to serve their shareholders, they're going to continue to do things that squeeze artists because at the end of the day, they're trying to maximize profit for their shareholders. I was watching an interview with Troy Carter, and Troy Carter said that Spotify should look at their artists as shareholders. They're never going to do that. That's not a thing. Like it would be great if they viewed their artists as shareholders, but that's not a thing when a company is public because that CEO is beholden to like having to hit their mark every single quarter, right? So they're going to do what they need to do to get their executive bonus and to keep their position. And a lot of times that means trying to squeeze more out of the artist. It means laying people off. So they're going to make decisions that don't make sense for the artist. I wish Troy Carter, in terms of what he was speaking, I wish that was true. I wish they kind of looked at it as more of like, oh, these are the people that fuel our platform. These are the people that essentially bring money to our platform. But ultimately, they view the shareholders, the people that own the stock in the company, as the of primary importance, and they're going to make decisions that reflect that.
Oh yeah, it's the same reason, McDonald's workers are still kind of seen as these replaceable and unnecessary parts of that corporate brand and are constantly, you cut their wages, someone else is going to replace them, right? Because they're not shit. But the CEO, he's irreplaceable because he's getting money for the shareholders. And people are like, well, why are the burger prices going up? It's because these fucking workers want extra money. It's like, no, that's not how corporations operate.
Yeah. I mean, right now, you're seeing record profits at some of these companies and people are struggling. You're seeing, but it's typically just because people are getting laid off and prices are getting hiked up. I'm not an economist. Obviously, I've taken a lot of courses, but I don't sit here to say that I'm like a guru in understanding inflation and things like that. But a lot of inflation is just these companies being greedy and driving the prices up for things, for basic necessities. So you're seeing Walmart with record profits, things like that, and it sucks. Ultimately that's the system that we're in. But artists are going to continue to get squeezed. So we have to have people or organizations like the MLC that kind of keep watch and can combat certain things, because I'm sure there's going to be more little things that they try to do here and there that affect artists and affect your pockets. And I think that's wrong. But what can we do as the little guys or the individual artists? So
yeah, shout out to the MLC and anyone advocating for artists.
I just hope that they continue to keep people with the integrity of a Dave Bogan and I don't know Day like that, but he appears to be a person of integrity. I just don't want people to like come back to this clip. Dame post on him and then Day gets to some bullshit. And I'm like, but anyway, it seems like from what I understand, it seems like the MLC is solid. And I just hope that they continue to bring on people with integrity that want to fight on the behalf of creators, and it never changes from what it seems like their mission is now.